All right. Again, welcome to Outranked, a segment that I do here on the channel, The Gaffer, where I rank different films. The most recent one having to do with the Universal Monster films. If you haven't seen that, and you are a big fan of the black and white Universal Monster films, I would highly encourage you to check that out. But this time, we have a very, very special video to do for Outranked, where I'm going to be ranking my top 25 films that I saw in 2024. Couple rules, couple caveats to make you aware of just from the start. You'll notice that one film in particular, The Brutalist, is not in this list. The Brutalist was released, but it was a limited release in 2024. It was not until the beginning of 2025 that I was able personally to see it in theaters. So that film will be a part of the 2025 list that I do. In the same vein, there was a film that is on this list that had a limited release in 2023 and then had a wide release in 2024 that made it to theaters to where I could see it. So that one is a part of this list. One honorable mention, I don't know that I'd really call it an honorable mention. It came in 26th, that I'll just state here at the front, was Mad Max Furiosa. It got a 5 out of 10 from me. I was not impressed with that movie at all. There's a deeper review of that, if you're really interested in it, that's on this YouTube channel. You can check it out if you want to know more about that. But now that we've gotten all the housekeeping out of the way, let's hop right in to number 25.
So you're saying that someone called Beetlejuice?
Don't say his name. If you say his name 3 times, he will appear.
I know this is a big step for you, but in the words of Dr. Glickman, I'm gonna give you the push you need. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Is that
Beetlejuice.
First of all, I want you two kids to know this is a safe space, okay? Feel free to express yourself. Don't be afraid. I sense there's an enabler here, but we'll get to that.
At number 25, we have none other than Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, a film directed by Tim Burton. It is a follow-up from the 1988 original, starring Michael Keaton as the main character. I won't call him a protagonist. He's kind of in between an antagonist and a protagonist. Most of the time, antagonist. Also starring Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz. Catherine O'Hara returns as well in this one. And new faces to the crew include Jenna Ortega, Justin Theroux, Willem Dafoe, and Monica Bellucci. Budget for this movie was $100 million. That is an estimate that is listed on IMDb's website. In total, the domestic box office as of February 8th, when I took a look at this particular film, it had $294.1 million. The source for any of these box office numbers are coming from, or is coming from, thenumbers.com. That's where I get a lot of my numbers for this. International box office, it, as of February 8th, made $157.8 million. Put those together, and the worldwide box office was $451.9 million. With a budget of $100 million and a box office take-in of $451.9 million, I'd say this film was a pretty good success. Now, personally, for me, this just didn't, it was a fun film, but it just didn't stick the landing. And in part, I believe that is due to there being so many stories trying to be told in this film that it's just a little bit everywhere. It makes it chaotic. There were some choices for certain scenes that didn't really make a lot of sense. A choice for one character in particular that's a very small character. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly the character that I'm talking about, that just, in my opinion, it didn't really need to be there, and it was kind of just odd. It was weird. Which, for Beetlejuice, for something to be weird is usually a good thing, usually fits. If it's too weird for Beetlejuice, that pretty much says it all. It just didn't need to be in the movie. It really jolted me out of the experience, and ultimately, I could only give this movie a 6 out of 10. It was fun. I mean, it does pay homage quite a bit to the '88 film, but not too much. A lot of times, films will pay too much of an homage to the original, and when they do that, they take away from the experience, I guess. And it goes from being nostalgic to just cheesy. So this one does at least do that right. It was a fun watch. Probably not one that I'll be returning to consistently. So ultimately, like I said, it gets a 6 out of 10 from me. IMDb gives it a 6.7 out of 10. It is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It got a 75% there. And then the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 79%. So that is number 25. Fun fact real quick, though, about Beetlejuice. One stipulation that was made by Michael Keaton for him to return and reprise this role was that he wanted his character of Beetlejuice to have the exact same amount of screen time that he had in the original 1988 film, which, if you did not know this, in the original 1988 film, Beetlejuice only shows up for a total of 17 minutes, really, in the movie, which is baffling because it seems like he's there the whole time. That's a masterclass in editing. So that really, to me, was a very, very fun fact about that original film. And that is the case with this new film. The follow-up to it, Michael Keaton, yet again, really only got about 17 minutes in the film as a whole. So that is, to me, very cool, a very interesting piece and fact about this particular film. So that is number 25. Now it is on to number 24.
How does that feel? Regret starting to burble up in your throat?
Hey, Cal. Good God, Cosmo. Who's the girl? What the hell is wrong with you, huh?
Hey, Tater Tot.
Friend. Why don't you...
What kind of friend?
No. Hey.
We're stronger than you look.
Hey.
You know I'll find out.
Yeah?
Whatever, man.
Well. Hulk and Dagger.
Starting to see why I live alone.
Keith.
What kind of a kid creates an invisible if?
Number 24 is If, a film that was directed and written by John Krasinski. You may know him best from the show The Office, where he played Jim. He also did a video series during COVID that may still be going, I'm not positive, known as Some Good News. And he is also responsible for the Quiet Place series. So you may know him from one or all of those things. This film also starred Kaylee Fleming, Ryan Reynolds. John Krasinski does star in it as well. It also includes Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Fiona Shaw, and Steve Carell as the big purple monster. The budget for this movie was $110 million. That was estimated, again, by IMDb. Most of the estimates that you see for budgets as we continue going are going to be IMDb, so I'm not going to belabor the point every time that I say the budget. But that's where most of those sources come from. Domestic box office, it took in $111.4 million, so it just made back its budget domestically. Internationally, it made $73.5 million. Put those together, worldwide box office, $184.9 million. So it did decent. It did make back its budget. I thought this was yet again, if a movie is getting a 6 or a 7 out of 10 from me, 6 and 7, that's still decent. It means it's a good movie. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it on first watch. May not really be a film I return to, at least often. Ultimately, for this one, I think pacing kind of was a little bit of an issue, and it just kind of seemed, storyline-wise, I guess the word would be diluted, if I could use that, kind of watered down, so to speak. It was fun, but it just didn't move my emotions quite a bit. And I kind of expected it to. This could be a very interesting, deeper topic. I know it's a film for kids. I got that. But even then, if you lean too heavily into... Mr. Rogers stated that the reason he felt he had such a connection with kids was that he just treated them like little adults, little people. And I think that rings pretty true. Kids are a lot smarter and get quite a bit of things more than they're given credit for. And a lot of times I think that we try to make things overly kiddie, thinking that we've got to make it as simple and sweet, or in some cases, make the comedy over the top, slapstick, and that kind of stuff for them to appreciate the movie. You don't really have to do that. So I think this one kind of did do that just a little bit. It very much so leaned into the kid audience and tried to, I don't want to say talk down to him. It wasn't really talking down to him, but, you know, it was like, hey, guys, how are you? Instead of, hey, how you doing? You know, that kind of thing. I don't have a word really to describe it. If you think of a word, just drop it in the comment section here on YouTube. But that was really my takeaway, and ultimately it made me realize I was watching a kid movie instead of just a movie, if that makes sense. And that's fine. I mean, that's perfectly fine if that's the route you want to go. But I think kids can appreciate being talked to like any other person. So, and having content built for them like any other person. It doesn't mean that it has to be PG or PG-13, but it also doesn't mean you go so softly touched that it really just loses it, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm not going to belabor the point. Ultimately, this film got a 7 out of 10 for me. It was a good movie. I did enjoy it. It's just not one that I really could see myself returning to on a regular basis, saying, you know what, I really think I want to watch If. I don't see myself doing that. But it was fun, and I think kids will enjoy it, and probably enjoy it more than I did. But I don't know. I think pacing and story could have used a little bit more work. So ultimately, I gave it a 7 out of 10. The acting was fantastic in it, though. I did think that was good. It was just, I think, somewhere in that writing, I guess. It could have used a little bit more. So IMDb gives this a 6.4 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes lists it as rotten at 50%. That's the critics' score. And then the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes gives this an 86%. So that is If. Quick fun fact about this movie, though, if you have seen it or if you're planning to see it, a scene to pay attention to, The grandmother in the movie is actually seen watching a film on her television. And that film is none other than Harvey, which was in 1950, is when it was released, starred Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart plays this character in that movie that claims to have a 6-foot-tall imaginary friend that's a rabbit. So it's interesting. It's a very, very fun detail, I think, to this movie that does give it a little bit more specialness, that they played into highlighting another film that dealt with imaginary friends. So I thought that was very, very cool. That is number 24, If. Now we're on to number 23.
About our wager.
The barbarian. Yes, I haven't forgotten. I always repay my
I
debts.
was merely going to suggest that perhaps your luck might change, shall we say, double or quits.
At number 23, we have Ridley Scott's return to the Colosseum with Gladiator 2. It was directed, like I said, by Ridley Scott, written by David Franzoni, Peter Craig, and David Scarpa. I hope I'm pronouncing people's names right as I go on through this. If not, I supremely apologize. It would excite me if they are actually watching this video. So if they are, again, I apologize. I'll do my best to continue to educate myself on the pronunciation of specific names. So, this also stars Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, Connie Nielsen, Joseph Quinn, as well as many other stars. The budget for this movie was $250 million estimated. Domestic box office take as of February 8th was $172.4 million. International box office, $288.6 million, to come to a grand total for worldwide box office of $461 million. It did incredibly well compared to the budget. It did make the budget back. It didn't quite double it, but it did at least make it back. It did better internationally than domestically, based on these numbers in terms of just money. For me personally, I enjoyed this movie. Fun fact about me, the original Gladiator, I thought it was good, but it just didn't really excite me. It wasn't a movie that I really got into, but I did enjoy it. I think it's cool, a cool story, but it's just one that, let's just say, I don't spend a lot of time contemplating the Roman Empire. We'll leave it there. This particular movie, though, for me, I did have some qualms with it. One particular instance happens in the Colosseum where something is introduced. I'm not going to say what. I will, because it's in the trailer. It's in the trailer. Sharks are introduced. I don't get that. I don't understand. Like, I think I need somebody to explain to me how they could have possibly gotten sharks into that Colosseum. And a lot of the set for this movie was pretty non-CGI. I mean, they obviously use CGI to enhance some things, but Ridley Scott also likes to use real sets. And I commend him for that. I think that's tremendous. And it really adds a lot to film. So for something that relies so heavily on something like that and is about a historical moment, to use something that just jolts an audience member out of that historical moment, that they're like, how would you have even made that happen? That I got to remove points for. I don't get it. Why wouldn't you have gone with, I don't know, crocodiles or something? I mean, something that would have made more sense than a shark. So in that instance, I gotta take points away. There were also some editing choices. Some of it is editing. I think some of it is directing and writing. There's a particular scene where Denzel Washington wants Paul Mescal brought to him, and then literally it cuts to the next scene, and Denzel is going to him. I was like, what? That didn't make sense to me. It's a small thing, I know, but it did impact my viewing. And then another scene where it's claimed that Paul Mescal does not speak English, and then he proceeds to speak English. So, it's little things like that, I think, that could have been tightened up a little bit better. So ultimately, this movie got a 7 out of 10 from me. Again, not a film that I really see myself returning to that often. It was good. I thought that Denzel Washington, honestly, all the actors did fantastic, but Denzel Washington really stuck out, and it makes sense that he would get award nominations for that particular role. So I do think he did great. One thing I will say is that I do fear that Denzel Washington has certain instances to where he returns to previous roles that he's played in just his mannerisms and the way that he acts. For instance, in this particular movie, Gladiator 2, there were certain instances I kind of expected a line from American Gangster of him just going, "My man." So the fact that I kind of felt like I was watching, I believe his character is Frank in American Gangster, the fact that I kind of felt like I was watching Frank just dropped into Rome. Kind of impacts that performance a little bit. So it's still great. I still loved that role in American Gangster. So, and I couldn't get enough of it. So it worked in this particular instance, but I do think that's something to kind of be careful of in future roles. So anyway, it gets a 7 out of 10 from me. IMDb gives it a 6.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh with 71%, and the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 82%. Fun fact about this movie, there is a monkey that is essentially given a high-up role within the government in this film, and that's, believe it or not, actually rooted in Roman history, and it's based on Emperor Caligula, who wanted to make his horse consul, which is basically second in command, only behind the emperor. Now, according to historical accounts, Caligula was assassinated before he was actually able to do that. One interesting note, though, is actually that many historians believe that account to kind of be fabricated to tarnish Caligula's legacy, which is interesting because if you know enough about Caligula, you really probably didn't have to go above and beyond to tarnish his legacy. He kind of did a little bit of that himself. So anyway, that is Gladiator 2. It comes in 23rd, and now we are on to number 22.
Look, I am not turning this ship into a flying billboard, no matter how much you want it to happen. And, by the way, we don't have time to test all this before liftoff.
We don't have to send any of this up into space as long as we say it went.
Oh, so you're gonna lie?
It's called selling. We're not lying to the customer. We're changing the way they think.
No, it's called lying.
At number 22, we have Apple TV's film that was released into theaters, Fly Me to the Moon. It was directed by Greg Berlanti, written by Keenan Flynn, Bill Kirstein, and Rose Gilroy. The budget for this movie was $100 million estimated. At the domestic box office, it took in $20.5 million, and that was as of January 11th when I checked on this particular movie. The international box office, it took in $17.6 million, and overall worldwide, $38.1 million. So it did not do well at all in terms of money. And I believe this is probably one of the films that has caused Apple TV to kind of pump the brakes, go back to the drawing board, and really consider if they want to be a theater player, so to speak. So, and it is interesting because Apple TV Plus, to me, absolutely dominates TV series. Silo, Shrinking, Ted Lasso, Severance. I've become obsessed with Severance as of late. You know, they really nail it when it comes to TV series. So, you know, I think that causes us to go, well, what happened? Why didn't this resonate the way that it did? Partially, I think that's because of marketing, which is really interesting to me because this film is about marketing. It's about selling the moon landing. So the fact that it didn't quite stick the landing on marketing the film itself is quite interesting. It could have been pushed out more, I think. More commercials could have been done for it had the proper marketing and word of mouth. I have to believe it would have done better because it really wasn't a terrible film. I thought it was funny. I thought that it offered a very interesting take, especially in discussing the whole conspiracy theory of faking the moon landing. So, I thought it was great. I thought Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson did absolutely fantastic jobs in it. Ray Romano, I love Ray Romano in absolutely anything. I think he's spectacular. And that also goes for Woody Harrelson. They all did a really good job. I think pace probably played a little bit of a factor in this movie for me personally. That's why it's only an 8 out of 10 from me. But, ultimately, it was a fun film. And I do think that the actors did an incredible job at the roles that they were given. I just think that pacing probably played a factor, and it just didn't quite get there as a movie that's a big blockbuster hit. And you know what? Maybe that's not what they were going for. And that's perfectly fine. And if it's not, it probably deserves to be a 9 out of 10 from me. But I do think the pacing could have been a little better on this one. But ultimately, it gets an 8 out of 10 from me. It is a movie that I could see myself returning to watch again, as opposed to some of the previous movies that I mentioned. So it gets an 8 out of 10 from me. IMDb gives it a 6.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, a 65%. It is not certified fresh. From the audience perspective, this is a new thing Rotten Tomatoes is doing with the popcorn meter, where if it gets enough reviews from the audience and they're high enough, then it's verified hot. And in this case, this one is verified hot at 89% from the audience. So right in there with mine, I said it could be a 9. So, this probably deserves to be an 8, 8.5 is what I would give it. So that 89% doesn't surprise me one bit. Fun fact about this movie, Colin Yost Scarlett Johansson's husband, who many people know from Saturday Night Live, the Weekend Update. He appears as Senator Cook in this film, and it actually marks the very first time that the two of them have gotten to share the screen together in a movie, and I think that's a pretty fun thing. So, and a pretty special thing. So that was really cool and fun to see. So, number 22 is Fly Me to the Moon, and that brings us to number 21.
You were gone forever.
It was 3 days, but I missed you every...
What did you bring me?
Bring you?
You said you'd bring me a present.
Huh. Well, let me see.
Whoa. What's it do?
What's it?
At number 21, we have Moana 2, put out by Disney. It was released in theaters November 27th. It was directed by David G. Derrick Jr., Jason Hand, and Dana Ledoux Miller. It was written by Jared Bush, Dana Ledoux Miller, Beck Smith, Bryson Chun, and it starred, I'm going to do my best to pronounce this name right, Ali Cravalho, Dwayne Johnson, Walale Chung, Rose Matafeo, David Fain, and Alan Tudyk. The budget for this movie was $150 million. Domestic box office, $434.8 million as of January 11th when I checked this movie. International box office was $554.9 million. Worldwide box office almost crossed into the $1 billion range. It made $989.7 million. This movie, an absolutely smash hit. It did incredibly well, not surprising at all. It's probably partially due to the same reason that I think Beetlejuice did as well as it did, which is simply put because it already had a built-in audience. And really, if you look at the top 10 films just based on box office last year, 9 out of the 10 are sequels, which is crazy. But that's the hot thing, and the studios know that. They know that. They've seen the data, they've done the analysis, they know people are nostalgic, and they want to see films they've enjoyed in the past come back and more of the story get told. So, it's no different with Moana 2, built-in audience. It's also a family film, which, here's the deal on family films. It's not just a husband and wife going to these movies. They're bringing their kids too. So let's say it's a family of 4, that's 4 tickets as opposed to the usual husband and wife 2. So that helps in terms of money that is generated at the box office. So, and that's not to downplay this movie at all. I'm just saying that helps in terms of raising those box office numbers for sure. So, anyway, Moana 2 to me, spectacular. I thought it was a very fun film. The music was great. Just like the first one. I think the first one's music was stronger to me. In fact, I think How Far I'll Go, maybe it competes to be one of, if not my favorite Disney song that's been written. I think that song is absolutely wonderful. So this one still does have good music. I think for me, one of the things that really took away from this film is that, yet again, to use the word diluted or watered down, so to speak, I would apply that to the villain in this. I don't really know why they didn't spend more time to really kind of make the audience want to see the villain fail. And I'm not saying you want to see the villain succeed, but I'm just saying you're kind of like, meh, about this particular villain. It's not like a Jafar. It's not like Cruella de Vil level villain. It's just kind of meh, so to speak. So there is an end credit scene to this movie, just so you're aware. It is interesting. I do have something I would compare it to. I'm not going to bring it up, but there is clearly an influence to the end credit scene that's very interesting. So, stay for the end credits, or if you're watching this on streaming, when the credits start rolling, fast forward a little bit and just give it a watch. I do think it's going to open up a very interesting chance at the third film being better than this one. And this was a good film. It is a film that I could see myself returning to. So ultimately, this one gets an 8 out of 10 from me. IMDb gives it a 6.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's not certified fresh, but it did get a 61% from critics, so it is not rotten. And the audience score for this particular film was 86%. And that was when I looked these up, which would have been January 11th. So it could very well be verified hot at this point. If it's gotten enough reviews, it would be tough for me to believe it hasn't. But, it may still not be verified hot. So when I looked at it, it was not. So fun fact about this, in just 3 weeks, 3 weeks in theaters, it outgrossed the first Moana. That's pretty stunning. That is truly something special. And again, I think, again, that kind of speaks to a built-in audience that really craves this intellectual property, this content. So, and rightfully so, because Moana is the original is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful film. So, and this one was good too. So, again, gets an 8 out of 10 from me, and ranks in 21st. That is Moana 2. And now we move on to 20th.
Why are you here?
I think there's been a misunderstanding.
Clearly.
Because I was under the impression that you did want me here.
That's a delusional thought. We haven't spoken in a year.
I'm happy for you. This whole director thing looks good on you. Even the gardening hat, somehow.
Everyone wears them. It's like a set thing. Okay?
Yeah, I see it. They're not making it look as good as you are, that's all. And I'm not trying to be flat. I'm just saying the facts. But you look good in everything. You look good in nothing, whatever. No, I don't mean it like that. But you do look good in nothing.
This isn't going to work.
You do, but it's not what I...
In 20th is a very, very, very fun film. Comedic, action-packed. I think the material for it is really good. I'll get into it a little bit more here in just a second, but it's The Fall Guy, starring Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. It was directed by David Leitch, written by Glenn A. Larson and Drew Pearce. It also starred Aaron Taylor Johnson, Hannah Waddingham, Teresa Palmer, and many others. The budget for this film was $125 million estimated. The domestic box office, it took in $92.9 million, internationally $87.8 million, and overall $180.7 million worldwide at the box office. That was as of January 11th. So it made the budget back and made a little bit over that. So ultimately, it did a decent job. It had a decent run at the box office. It didn't blow it out of the water, but it's always good when the budget is made back, first of all, and that you exceed it. So it did a decent job at the box office. For me, this film was a lot of fun, like I said. Ryan Gosling, anytime he can be put in some form of a comedic, quirky role, he's fantastic in it. it reminds me of his role in The Nice Guys, which, off the top of my head, it's been a minute since I've watched it, but it's definitely one I return to over and over with him and Russell Crowe. I'd probably give that movie a 10 out of 10. It's spectacular. But again, it's that same kind of role. It's that quirky, comedic relief role while dealing with a film that has thrills. So in this particular instance, it's no different. This film has thrills. It has action, some drama, and the acting is spectacular in it. It's really fun to watch Emily Blunt in her role. I feel like I think she does a great job. Hannah Waddingham, I adore in absolutely anything that she's in. Obviously, my first introduction to her was Ted Lasso. Prior to that, she was in Game of Thrones. But I wasn't a big Game of Thrones watcher, believe it or not. So I think she did great in this movie. I think the writing was good. Pacing was good. I think for me, I don't know if maybe it was kind of Aaron Taylor Johnson's role in it. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't quite get to that 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 level. There's just something about it for me. I think it's essentially what we hear termed all the time as popcorn movie. It's not meant to be some masterpiece, Oscar-winning film. That's not what it was trying to do. So ultimately, it's a fun film. It's a good, if not better than good film. But it doesn't quite get to that 9 out of 10 level for me. So I would recommend seeing it. Absolutely. I think the theme and the meaning to this movie, at least partially, is an extremely good one and one that does need to exist, which is highlighting stunt men and women. I think that's just they're often they often serve thankless jobs, essentially, and they don't get the credit that they deserve, and they really do, in many cases, put their lives on the line to give us spectacular, meaningful, impactful scenes. And our films that we love simply would not be the films that we love without them. And so it's really good to see them in the spotlight that they deserve. So that's fantastic. I think that has to exist. This film really needed to exist. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. It was a show, I believe, before this film. But I haven't seen the show, so I can't give it any form of a rating. But I do hear that it was a pretty good show too. So anyway, I give it an 8 out of 10. IMDb, it gets a 6.8 out of 10. It is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with 82%, so critics loved it. The audience score on this film is 85%. So right in there with what I gave it at 8 out of 10. So I absolutely agree here. I think it's well deserving of those numbers. One fun fact about this movie, it actually made history. Set a Guinness World Record, in fact, when it pulled off 8.5 cannon rolls with the Jeep in the movie. The previous record in the Guinness World Records was 7, and that belonged, believe it or not, to Adam Curley for the film Casino Royale in 2006. So, super interesting. I think that's really cool that this movie could also set a record for a stunt in a movie that is about stunts. So I think that's really, really cool. So that is The Fall Guy. It came in 20th on my list, and we are now cracking into the teens with number 19.
TV Spangler, you stay inside this car. I have a ghost to bust.
All right, that was cool.
Harry, come on.
No, I know, I'm sorry. It's just the way she said it. It sounded cool.
Get back in here! I can't hear you over the nuclear accelerator!
At number 19, we have Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I am a huge, huge fan. So there may be a little bias from me on this, but I am a massive, massive, massive fan of the Ghostbusters franchise. I adore it. It was directed by Gil Kenan. It was written by Gil Kenan, Jason Reitman, Ivan Reitman, two important people to have because I do believe that they also wrote the originals. Dan Aykroyd, and of course the original story came from Harold Ramis, the late Harold Ramis, tremendous actor, tremendous writer. The comedy that he produced was nothing short of brilliant. It starred Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Kumail Nanjiani, and Patton Oswalt, or Oswalt. I'm not sure how he pronounces it. The budget for this film was $100 million, estimated domestic box office $113.3 million. International box office $87.4 million. And at the worldwide box office, once you add those two together, it ended up making $200.7 million. So it doubled its budget. Very successful film in terms of the box office. It wasn't without its critiques, its criticisms. I think some people... One interesting criticism that I heard was they're relying too heavily on things that we've already seen with Ghostbusters, which is interesting to me because this is really kind of the first instance that we get something other than Zuul as the big bad in a Ghostbusters film. I just don't get it. I don't get that critique in terms of it's relying too much on nostalgia, the original cast. Why can't it just be more original? Which is really dangerous because that starts getting into the same thing that I have a problem with the Star Wars fan club, at least part of the Star Wars fan club. Not all of them, obviously. But one of the things about Star Wars, the toxic fan club is what I'll term it, is that it constantly has an outcry for original material, and then it gets the original material, and then there's an outcry that we don't have enough about Skywalker. So if you're a part of that fandom, that portion of the fandom, my plea to you is just stop, because ultimately what it's going to lead to is nothing being made at all. And you're going to really lose out, I think. Just enjoy it as it is. Now, if it's a bad movie, that's one thing. If it's a bad show, I mean, it's warranted to have a criticism. But if your criticism is either it's not Star Warsy enough or that it's not original enough, when you're given something original like The Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, I feel like was, for the most part, well received. But The Acolyte really peeved me the way it got treated. I thought The Acolyte was good. So anyway, this isn't a Star Wars. We're not talking about Star Wars right now. We're talking about Ghostbusters. But it does apply to Ghostbusters. The only reason you are there to see a Ghostbusters film is because you are a fan of Ghostbusters. So to say that it's too Ghostbustery, for lack of a better term, is meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless, and it's not deserving of that critique in any way. So to me, I thought the reliance on that, as well as pulling an original big bad into it, it was great. It was fantastic. It was exactly what I want from a Ghostbusters movie. So this film got an 8 out of 10 from me. Again, once you start to get in that 9 to 10 out of 10 range, we're talking movies that should probably be discussed as, potential masterpieces, award-winning. And by award, I mean like Academy Award winning. Once you start getting into that range, that discussion starts to happen. Obviously, I don't know that this one gets to that level, but I do think that it, for what it's supposed to be, it was spectacular. And it's absolutely a film that I will return to over and over again, probably around Halloween. Usually around Halloween, I'll watch some of my favorite series that include things like Ghostbusters, the Alien franchise, the Thing, which isn't really a franchise, it's just one movie, but I start going through my list, and Ghostbusters is a part of that. And so I definitely see myself returning to this movie for sure. A fun fact about this movie, it actually put the Ghostbusters franchise as a whole over the $1 billion mark at the global box office, despite some of that negative reception. So that is pretty spectacular. As a Ghostbusters fan, I love it. I love seeing it. So I'm really looking forward to potential follow-ups to continue with this series. I think the sky's the limit here. And I think it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see if they start pulling more from the original animated show. So I think that could be pretty interesting. So IMDb gives us a 6.1 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes has it rotten based on the critic score at 42%. And the audience score for this movie was an 82%. It's not certified hot. And the reason some of these might not be certified hot is because that's a relatively new thing, and they may not be applying that retroactively. They may not be applying that to past. I don't know. Or at least yet. They haven't gone back yet. So, anyway, 82%, still fantastic for an audience score. And it got an 8 out of 10 from me. So, right in line with that. So, great movie. Highly recommend it. At number 19, it's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Definitely should see it if you haven't. I think you'll have a really good time with it, especially if you're a Ghostbusters fan. And that brings us to number 18. Number 18, we have Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. I got to tell you, I'll get to that in a minute. First of all, it was directed by Adam Wingard. It was written by Terry Rossio, Adam Wingard, Simon Barrett. It starred Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Dan Stevens, Kaylee Hoddle, Alex Ferns, and Fela Chen, among others, obviously. The budget for this movie was estimated at $135 million. Domestic box office, it made $196.3 million as of January 11th. International box office, it made $372.3 million to ultimately make at the worldwide box office $568.7 million. That right there is destroying it in terms of the box office. You spent $135 million estimated, of course, budget and you ended up making $568.7 million worldwide, that's a success. That's a smashing success. Now here's the deal. Yet again, we've got an audience built in here. You're probably gonna keep hearing me say this until I get to films that are originals. But the films that were in the top 10 for the box office, like I said, 9 out of 10 of them were sequels. So there's already an audience built in here. And that is speaking to a lot of the reason they're probably as high as they are for the box office. So it's not to say they're not good movies, but to see this kind of success is pretty shocking. And when I first saw the trailer for this movie, there's a scene where Kong comes up and he's got that metal arm, and I went, what are we doing? Like, this is just insanity. It's like WWE meets Godzilla Kong, you know? And as a Godzilla fan, I'm really more into the more dramatic, not over-the-top films. Your Shin Godzilla, your Godzilla -1, even the Godzilla with Bryan Cranston. That style more than your over-the-top. Now, nothing makes it more American than going big, right? So, that being said, I walked into this movie expecting that to be the case and really had a very low bar after seeing the trailer, and I was pleasantly surprised. I really, really enjoyed it. It was just, I keep saying it, these films are fun. This one absolutely was a blast. It was the perfect summer film to go to, just to get away and escape and have a little bit of fun. And I think it did that. It absolutely accomplished it. The acting was good. The writing was good. The pacing was good. It was just a good movie. And it's, yet again, this is one I could see myself returning to. Because I'm a Godzilla fan. And I watch Godzilla material all the time. So I think this did a good service, at least. It paid homage to Godzilla. But let's remember, this is Godzilla Kong. I can't just talk about Godzilla. I need to talk about Kong. And I think it paid homage to Kong very well. So I think if you're a fan of Kong, you'll enjoy the movie. If you're a fan of Godzilla, you'll enjoy the movie. So a lot of things that I have heard, and we're going into my fun fact here about this movie, a lot of times in this one and in Godzilla -1, talking to people that saw that, they were like, Godzilla seems a lot like my cat. Turns out there's some truth to that. Fun fact, director Adam Wingard actually stated that he based the mannerisms and movements of Godzilla, particularly the scene in Godzilla Kong where he's curled up, and you see this in the trailer, he's curled up in the Roman Colosseum. He based that off of his cat called Mischief, which is just amazing. And now it makes complete sense, right? They nailed it. Additionally, this is something that blew my mind. He stated he actually learned from talking to Godzilla -1 director Takashi Yamazaki that he too drew his main inspiration from his cat. So, it all makes sense now. Why we're saying, these mannerisms of Godzilla, they seem like my cat. And in Godzilla -1, especially the scene where he's swimming in the water behind the boat, there's certain instances where you're like, that reminds me of a cat. So now we know why. IMDb gives this a 6.1 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it 54%, and it is rotten based on their score. However, the audience score, the popcorn meter, it is verified hot with 90%. So right up there with around what I gave it, an 8 out of 10. I don't think it quite gets to masterpiece or Academy Award level for me personally, but 8 out of 10 is still spectacular. That is still a really good movie. Really, if you look at this top 25 list, if you're getting 6 is on the lower end. It's very rare I give anything below a 5, to be honest. If it gets below a 5, it's pretty bad. And Furiosa kind of towed that line with a 5 out of 10 from me. The Mad Max film that came out last year, which stunned me, by the way. I didn't expect to be giving it that. But, you know, if you're getting a 6, a 7, it's still a good movie. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just it doesn't quite get to that 8 level, 9 and 10 masterpiece level. So, but ultimately, Godzilla Kong, great movie, a lot of fun, and definitely leans into the American Godzilla. So, the over-the-top, go big style. So, if you haven't seen it and you're a Godzilla fan, you should give it a watch. I think you'd really like it. Just go into it, you know, not expecting a lot from it, just that it's going to be fun and you're going to enjoy watching Godzilla and Kong together. So, and I think if you walk into it with that, you're going to have some fun. And you also find out some new things about Monarch. So that's always a plus too. So, that is Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. It is 18th. And now we move on to number 17.
Three. Only 3.
We take them all. No, never. Leave one. Always. That is the law. Bonding day is tomorrow. These are yours. You are older by length of a sunset. Older. Suna, which one sings to you?
At number 17, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is another franchise that I adore. It's been really well done. It's been really well done since the first one of this particular group, which starred James Franco. This movie was directed by Wes Ball, written by Josh Friedman, Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver. It starred Owen Teague, Freya Allen, Kevin Durand, Peter Macon, and William H. Macy, among others. The budget was $160 million estimated. Domestic box office, it made that back with $171.1 million. Internationally, it made $226.2 million. Ultimately, worldwide, the total came to $397.3 million as of January 11th. So this was another smashing success. It did really, really well. And to me, I thought it was an absolutely gorgeous film, first of all. I think the scenes were just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I actually have a full review on this one on YouTube here. So I'm not going to go into any great detail about, you know, why I gave the score that I ultimately did. But I'll give a little bit of detail. I thought it was fun. I thought at times it had a little bit of a pacing issue, a little bit. But, I mean, ultimately, William H. Macy, chef's kiss. He's always good. He's good in anything that he's in. For me personally, my favorite's total side note, but Fargo. I adore that movie. I think that is a 10 out of 10 easily. Maybe one of my top films of all time. But that's in large part due to William H. Macy and Frances McDormand, for that matter, who's also brilliant. But this movie's a lot of fun. I keep saying that. It is. I'm going to have to come up with a new term, I think, because that's something I just keep saying, and I hate saying the same thing over and over. But if it's true, it's true, right? So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. I think it is a good installment for this franchise. one of the things you run into with a franchise is that sometimes things can just be superfluous. Essentially, that the franchise could have existed without it. I don't know that this franchise could have with this movie. I think that this adds enough to it that lore is just continuing to grow more and more. So I thought it was a great movie and really enjoyed it. Ultimately, IMDb gives us a 6.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have this certified fresh at 80%. The audience score for this movie was 77%. And my score was 8 out of 10. So it is right in line with the others pretty much. Maybe a little higher than your IMDb, but for the most part, right in line with how it was rated among the other scores. So absolutely, I think this was a good movie. I think that if you like or even love Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, you're going to enjoy this film. So I would highly recommend it. That is number 17, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Quick fun fact, Variety actually reported that the full trailer for this film received 75 million views within 24 hours, which is pretty wild. So, anyway, number 17, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And now we move on to number 16.
Okay. I'm just saying.
Just what?
Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you? Central American? South American? What?
Florida.
Florida. Central. What about you? Where are you from?
Tell him, Jesse.
Missouri.
Missouri? It's the show me state, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what they call it?
Yes.
Why do they call it the show me state?
I don't know.
You don't know? It's American. It is American. 100%.
At number 16, we have Civil War, put out by A24. I remember when this trailer dropped, I was sitting there going, this has the potential to be an absolute masterpiece. It was directed by Alex Garland. It was written by Alex Garland, starring Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, I believe is how you pronounce his name, Kaylee Spaney, Nick Offerman, Jefferson White, Nelson Lee, and Jesse Plemons, among others. The budget for the film was estimated at $50 million. Domestically, it made $68.7 million. Internationally, $37.7 million. Worldwide, the total came to $106.5 million. So, more than doubled. Again, that's a great showing at the box office. Not bad at all. Nothing to be ashamed of there in any way. For me, Civil War, I think, is a very important story. Has a very important theme that needs to be told. It needs to be seen. I think very much so in the time in which we live, as polarizing as things have gotten politically, that this film needed to be made. It needed to exist. If for nothing else, to remind us to not get so caught up in our opinions that we not only force them on others, but we stop seeing people with other opinions as humans. essentially, and the dangers of that. It's very much so a warning about what things like fascism, authoritarianism entail, and what would happen if America descended to that level. And I absolutely say descended. I never really get it. I don't plan on getting into my own political views, but one thing I will say is that one of the top things that makes America such a wonderful place to live is the freedom of thought, the freedom of expression, the freedom to believe and worship the way that we want, our freedoms. And just the concept of democracy. Technically, we are a republic, but that being said, just the inner workings of this country from the very get-go, from the founding fathers, that's what makes this such a special place, and why it's such a joy to be an American. So, and that's why we take pride in it. So I think this movie really does a good job of showing the dangers of us essentially listening to the demons instead of the better angels of our nature, for sure. And it's an important movie. I think there's great shots in it. I think the acting was stunning. First of all, there's scenes, especially the one with Jesse Plemons, that just have you on the edge of your seat. I mean, it is unbelievably intense. So that was spectacular. It's just, it was a good movie. It was a good movie. Fun fact about it, the film was actually released in the United States on April 12th of last year, which marked 163 years to the day of the start of the actual American Civil War, which began on April 12th of 1861. That war ended on April 9th of 1865. That's just paying attention. That's paying attention to detail. It's being detail-oriented as a filmmaker, and the decisions in which you make. You always get points from me for stuff like that. Always. So, ultimately, I give this movie an 8 out of 10. IMDb gives it a 7 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh at 81% from the critics, and the audience score is 69% on the popcorn meter. The reason the audience score, which is kind of essentially what you get with IMDb, that's based, IMDb, to my knowledge, is based on overall scores that viewers of the film give it. So I think the reason those two are a little bit lower is probably because of the source material, to be honest. I think that, at least partially, that because it's political in nature, that some people, I don't know, may find themselves offended, I don't know. I think people are going to watch this and project things on it that don't deserve to be projected onto it. And as people, we need to be very careful of that. Not to project our own biases, offenses onto art, so to speak, and especially onto others, which happens all the time, unfortunately. So, anyway, I give this an 8 out of 10. Great movie. Really enjoyed it. Pacing was a little bit off. Again, I think it's slower. It was much slower than I expected, personally. But other than that, it was well written, and it was a good film. It was a very good film. So, that is Civil War in 16th, and now we are moving into the top 15. Here it is, number 15.
Mom made me promise I'd come by today. It's my birthday.
Wait, today is your birthday?
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
It's Brett.
I'm Isabel.
Yeah, I know.
Most relationships end. Friendships, romances, they break. You okay?
If you look closely, you'll find something tragic was happening.
Are you interested in writing something for us?
I don't do assignments anymore.
Yeah, well, you're a better writer than most people do anything. Have you heard the tapes?
No. Of what?
Sanford Police Department, this is Sean. Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. Looks like he's up to no good or something.
I want to be in the story. Really inside the story.
And build a thesis that shows how all of this is linked.
I gotta be honest with you, I don't understand. I don't see it.
You go and write your stories. Folks need to know about this.
You're trying to make sense of racism, but your thesis is flawed.
It was all lies. They knew we weren't inferior.
You don't escape trauma by ignoring it. You escape trauma by confronting it.
I don't write questions. I write answers.
At number 15, this is the movie that I was talking about at the beginning that got a limited release in 2023, but the wide release happened in 2024. So, therefore, I saw it in 2024, and it applies to my 2024 top 25 list. When I saw, well, again, I'll get into that in a minute. Number 15, it's Origin. It was directed by Ava DuVernay. I hope I'm saying that name right. Written by Ava DuVernay. Starring Anjanou Ellis-Taylor, John Bernthal, Niecy Nash, Emily Yancey, Finn Wittrock, Victoria Pedretti, and many others. The budget for the movie was $38 million. Domestically, it made $4.8 million as of January 11th, and internationally, it made $144,463. Ultimately, in total, it only made $4.9 million. Didn't make its money back. That's a problem. To me, that does not speak to this film. I think it speaks to potentially, again, the marketing of the movie. A lot of people didn't know that this movie even existed, which I really hate, because I think this is a very important topic. And Anjanou Ellis-Taylor blew me away, as did John Bernthal, but Anjanou Ellis-Taylor blew me away in this film. It's just, I knew the moment I saw the trailer for the first time, I literally looked at my wife and I was like, that has the potential to win an Oscar. I really wish more people saw this film. I think that it's an incredibly important topic. Whether or not you agree with it, you can agree that it should be discussed. Absolutely discussed. So, you know, I think it was done well. I think it was done very well. And I was moved. I was moved by this movie. So, fun fact, Ava DuVernay has stated that she chose the entire cast herself, which is interesting. A lot of times you have a specific person that's assigned to casting, but Ava actually picked it herself. So, ultimately, IMDb gives this movie a 7.2 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh at 81%. Critics loved it. The audience that saw it gave it 97%, and it is verified hot. And for me, I gave it an 8 out of 10. The reason it didn't go much higher, remember I said I expected this to be Oscar level. It's little things. Again, I mean, I think that pacing does play a factor with this movie. And I don't know. It didn't quite get to that special 9 out of 10. Doesn't mean it's not a special movie. Again, does not mean it's not a special movie. The fact that this is in the top 15, at this point, anything in this top 15 is a movie I'm returning to, potentially regularly. This movie deserves to be discussed. It deserves to be talked about. This deserves to be a topic regularly inside of our society. And it needs to be seen by more people. And obviously, as you can see, from the audience that did see it, they were blown away. So, I thought it was a great movie. Absolutely a great film. So, that is Origin. Came in 15th in my top 25. Now, we are on to number 14.
Do you even know what the show is? Tell me.
It's an all-nighter in the city. It's catching Richard Pryor at a drop-in or finding Paul Simon strumming in the back of a dive bar. It's meeting a girl outside of a bodega and getting lucky in a phone booth. It's everything you think is going to happen when you move to the city. That's our show. That's Saturday Night.
At number 14, it's Saturday Night. Directed by Jason Reitman. Written by Gil Keenan and Jason Reitman. This is the second time we've seen Jason Reitman pop in. Remember, he also was Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. It starred Gabriel LaBelle, Rachel, I don't know if it's Sino or Sinat, Corey Michael Smith, Ella Hunt, Dylan O'Brien, Nicholas Braun, and many, many others. The budget for the film was $25 million. Domestically, it made $9.5 million as of February 8th. Internationally, it made $242,938. Worldwide total, it made $9.8 million as of February 8th. So again, box office-wise, not great. Not great at all. That being said, if you are even remotely a fan of Saturday Night Live, you're going to love this movie. You're going to love this movie. We'll go ahead and jump into the fun fact because I was just about to go over it. And that is, the entire film is filmed in real time, which means that there are no jumps, from where you are currently to 2 days later or anything like that. There are no jumps. It's all real time. And that allows the audience to essentially further connect with the characters and feel like they are in the movie with them. It really helps. Doing things in real time like that really helps get that across. So, that made this pretty special, especially if you're, like I said, a Saturday Night Live fan. I really enjoyed it. I thought, all the characters were done very well. Chevy Chase felt like Chevy Chase. Dan Aykroyd felt like Dan Aykroyd. And if you're not familiar with the movie and what it's about, it's really about the very first night of Saturday Night. And just how chaotic things were. And the way in which it just happened. It was literal magic, the way that it just ended up coming together beautifully. So, very, very well done. Made me immediately afterwards start watching some of the old Saturday Night Live episodes and skits. for one, to see how close they got to the original, and two, just to enjoy them again. It rekindled my love of what Saturday Night Live is. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Again, there's that word, fun. I'm using too much of that F word right now. So, but I really enjoyed it. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. There were a couple scenes, one in particular that I don't think really needed to be in the movie. It's a crazy story, for sure, but I don't know that it needed to be in there. It was so shocking that it kind of pulls you out of the film a little bit. You're like, whoa. Kind of a grimace. And that's all I'm going to say about it. You'll know the scene I'm talking about, because I'm sure it will shock you as much as it shocked me. And it's very brief. So, that's Saturday Night. I gave it an 8 out of 10. IMDb gives it a 7 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh from the critics at 78%. From the audience, it got an 84%. Thoroughly love this movie. It was a blast to watch these characters have so much fun. So, and the way they played off one another. I think that's also an interesting piece to this, and true of Saturday Night Live and what makes it Saturday Night Live. The ability to play off one another and how that enhances the comedy. So they really nailed that in this movie. So if you like Saturday Night Live and you haven't seen the movie, you need to see it. I don't know where it's streaming currently. Maybe Paramount, maybe Prime. You know what? It's probably Peacock. It's probably Peacock now that I'm thinking about it, because that's NBC and that's where SNL is. So, anyway, definitely see this movie if you enjoy Saturday Night Live. Just a quick statement. You know, at this point, you may be wondering, well, what is it that made Saturday Night better than Origin or any of the other 8 out of 10s that came before this? It's just the way that it ended up shaking out for me. And, you know, what are the odds I come back to this movie versus the previous ones? And how often do I think I'll come back to them? And whichever ones are more often are probably going to be higher. But here's the deal. If they're all 8 out of 10s, chances are this could be interchangeable. These are not set in stone. This is not a set in stone top 25. It's a top 25 as of today. So down the line, there could be a shift. Who knows? And that's why you'll see me before too long doing my top 20 of all time. And I want to do that at the end of each year so that we can together see how things shift, because I guarantee you they will shift. I promise they're going to shift. And that's the same for you. I guarantee you what is number 5 for you today, maybe number 6 for you tomorrow, maybe 8th, maybe 3rd. Who knows? But right now, I would say Saturday Night, it is number 14 on my list. Definitely see it. And now we are on to number 13.
You didn't say which way we were going yet. Now, from what I gather, west, we double our chances. East, well, it's high risk, high reward.
Well, go for the reward. You don't want Ben to think you're boring.
Now, boring is not usually a problem for me, Kate.
2 cells to the west are fighting over the same inflow. They'll choke each other out. This one to the east is the sky all to herself. Moisture, wind shear, instability. All the things you need to give Ben a good show.
Number 13. This one is a special one for me. And that is Twisters. It was directed by Lee Isaac Chung. It was written by Mark L. Smith, Joseph Kosinski, Michael Crichton, and Marie Martin. starring Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, Anthony Ramos, Brandon Perea, Maura Tierney, among many others, included David Corenswet, who is the new Superman. He's in it. In fact, he found out about getting the part of Superman while on this film, which is really cool. And I think there's a video out there of the cast going crazy when he found out about it and getting very excited for him. And it's a cool video to watch. Anyway, this movie is very special to me. Ultimately, the budget for this was $155 million estimated. Domestically at the box office, it made $267.7 million as of January 11th. Internationally, it made $101.9 million. Worldwide, ultimately, the total came to $369.7 million as of January 11th. The reason that this film is special to me is because I absolutely obsess over the weather, especially severe weather. Anytime severe weather's coming through, especially tornadic, regardless of if it's close to me, I have radar up on my screen, and I use Radar Scope and Radar Omega, both of them. I have both up on my screen, and I am tracking those storms, and I'm learning more and more about being able to pinpoint where potential circulation or rotation is in a storm, as well as where an instance may be that it's on the ground. So, needless to say, I'm a weather nerd, 1,000%. And this movie, when I first saw the trailer, I was kind of scared because I love the original. Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I'm trying to remember who else. Carrie Ells is in the original as well. It was a great cast, and it was so well done, especially for its time. It had graphics that you just weren't used to seeing. It was movie magic. You were wondering, how did they pull that off? And that's Amblin, Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy. And I'm sure they probably used Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM. So the first one is just special. I return to it all the time, usually around storm season, which is around March, April, May, that time period we're about to go into. But when I saw the trailer for this one, I was a little bit concerned about it. It seemed like everything in the trailer was essentially an F5, and I was like, what have they done? Because in the original movie, it really kind of goes one by one if you're watching it. You know, you get kind of that F1, F2, and then it goes to an F2, F3, F4, and then you end with the big bad F5. So this movie, I thought, oh no, they've made everything an F5. Additionally, there were scenes in the trailer like the wind turbine getting snapped in half that I was like, that would never happen. Guess what? That storm season that occurred last year, there was an actual instance recorded by Reed Timmer, which you can find on YouTube. He's a big-time storm chaser and gets some of the best shots I've ever seen in my life. Reed Timmer got on camera a wind turbine getting snapped in half. So, you know, it is possible. It is very much so a thing. And, you know, not only that, but a lot of the jargon used in this follow-up, and it's not really, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a sequel because it's a new story, but this second Twister film, a lot of the jargon and language used is very much so in line with science. They're dropping words like dew point, instability. You know, it's incredibly well done from a science perspective too. And that's something that the first one, it did all right, but I think this one does better. So Glenn Powell's character is actually, to me, modeled off of Reed Timmer, who I just mentioned. He can be a little over the top, a lot of fun, but also generally knows what he's doing. and genuinely loves what he does. And that's why he gets so excited and over the top sometimes. So, and again, the, I guess, juxtaposition or the relationship between the actual scientists and the chasers, that's always interesting to see. And this film does a good job. I think the actors did great work on it. There are some instances, I did speak about how great it was to see so much of the scientific jargon used, but they use so much of it in short amounts of time that it almost feels like they're trying too hard. And it can come off a little bit like, all right, now we're just kind of getting cheesy. I'm glad that they used it, but probably should have peppered it just a little bit more, or maybe only included 1 or 2 instances of it. I don't know, but I think there would have been a better way to have done it. So, you know, that kind of tarnishes it just a little bit for me. The first scene of the film as well, I think, number one, really isn't advisable. I mean, I guess if you've got nowhere else to go, where they went might be your best line of defense, but I shudder to think that they showed it, or they used that particular location for that scene. Ultimately, I guess one of the things that happens in the scene would happen, and that does speak to the danger of going to that particular spot during a tornado if you're caught in one. But anyway, bottom line, I thought this was a great film. I really, really enjoyed it. Fun fact about it, Bill Paxton's son, which Bill Paxton was the main character in the original, if you remember, his son actually appears in the movie. He's the angry hotel guest during one of the scenes in the film that is essentially chewing out the person behind the desk. If you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the film, just kind of make a mental note to look for it as you're watching it. But I think that's really, really cool that Bill Paxton's son got to be there. So anyway, IMDb gives us a 6.5 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh with 75%. The audience gives this a 90%. It is verified hot on the popcorn meter. I give it an 8 out of 10. Again, great movie. It was very enjoyable to watch. And I really appreciate that they paid homage to the science of it and stuck with terminology that makes sense. So, that's Twisters. If you haven't seen it, you love weather, it's definitely a movie to add to the collection to watch. You know, there are a lot of tornado movies. If you are a weather enthusiast and a film enthusiast and you like weather films, then you know exactly where I'm headed with this. There are a lot of tornado films that are literally unwatchable. They're some of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. Supercell being one of them. I made it maybe a quarter of the way into the movie and I went, this is absolutely terrible. So, those kind of movies exist. Night of the Twisters, that's another one. But Twister and Twisters, absolutely great films and deserving to be on your shelf, in your digital shelf or library. You know, I'm always going to harp for physical copies of things if you really love them. But, yeah, definitely worth a watch. So, that's Twisters. It comes in 13th, and we are on to number 12.
Eddie, I need you to open that door right now, okay?
That's what the creature's waiting for us to do.
Open it, please. Listen to me.
Open the
Listen
door.
to me. She's pregnant. Please, guys, please. Come on. She's gonna have a baby, okay? Do you hear what I'm saying?
It takes that door 2 seconds to open, another 2 to 3 weeks.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on, what are you doing? Please.
There's plenty of time for the creature to get in here.
Please, please, please open the door. Why aren't you helping? Come on, help me, please, please, please.
At number 12, we have a franchise, another one that probably my number one horror franchise. We have Alien Romulus. It was directed by Fede Alvarez, known for the most recent Evil Dead remake. It was written by Dan O'Bannon, Ronald Shusett, Fede Alvarez, Rodo Sayegas, starring Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, and Spike Fern. Budget for the movie was estimated at $80 million. Domestically, it made $105.3 million, so easily made back the budget. Internationally, though, it made $245.5 million, which brought it, as of January 11th, worldwide to $350.8 million. Blew it out of the water. Incredibly successful film. And if you've seen it, it's easy to know why. If you've seen it and you're an Alien fan, it's easy to know why. I think that this particular one, which I believe takes place in between Alien and Aliens, the first and second, the original films, the acting is spectacular. The cinematography is gorgeous. To me, it was an interesting choice to rely so heavily on face huggers, which are the little spider-like things. If you've seen the movies, you know absolutely what I'm talking about. Or maybe even if you haven't, you probably do, because they're in the trailer. As an Alien fan, I love the fact that this film exists. David Johnson blew me away. I'm expecting big things from David Johnson. So if he's listening, you've raised the bar incredibly high for yourself. Because the way in which he played his role, it was a masterclass. It was a masterclass in how to do a role like that. So, plenty of suspense, scares. It was great. It was absolutely incredible. So, fun fact about this movie, Fede Alvarez had a limited release of the film, or a limited edition of the film, released on VHS to honor the original Alien. So he released this movie on VHS. There are copies of this movie on VHS. That's the first instance of a movie being released to VHS since A History of Violence, which was back in 2006. That was the last instance of a VHS, in case you didn't know that. So I thought that was really cool and a great way to pay homage to the original film. IMDb gives this a 7.1 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh at 79%. The audience score is 85%. And for me, it's an 8 out of 10. So directly in line with everybody else. It 1,000% is deserving, to me, of an 8. It's such a great entry to the Alien franchise. It's fantastic. So at 12, that's Alien Romulus. One other thing I will state about this movie that really stuck out to me, it used a lot of practical effects. Now, there was obviously some CGI, and in fact, the CGI that was used, there's a particular instance in the movie, I don't want to give it away, there's a particular instance that stood out so much, it was such a big problem, in my opinion, with the movie, that they have since gone back and tweaked it to be better. So I'm glad they did that. I'm glad they did go back and make it better, because it is noticeable. It's absolutely noticeable at CGI. So, but the practical effects in this, wow. The face huggers are practical. The xenomorphs are practical. It's just, I mean, a lot of it at least. I'm sure they use CGI in some instances, but A lot of practical effects used for this, and a lot to be said for that. So, wonderful film. So that's Alien Romulus. Comes in at number 12, and now we are on to number 11.
Yeah, of course.
You know, we had a really great time.
Well, I hope so. I know we can both be...
A bit much.
God, no, really. I mean, you guys have been...
Just a breath of fresh air.
Oh, well, that is very sweet of you to say.
Number 11. When I saw the trailer for this, I keep getting ahead of myself. Slow down. First of all, number 11 is Speak No Evil. It was directed by James Watkins and written by James Watkins. It was also written by Christian Toftrup and Mads Toftrup. It starred James McAvoy, Mackenzie Davis, Scott McNerney, Aisling Franciosi. I'm sure I'm butchering that last name. The budget for the film was estimated at $15 million. Domestically, it made $36.9 million as of January 11th. Internationally, it made $38.7 million. Worldwide, the total comes to $75.7 million. So it did very well. I was intrigued by the trailer for this movie when it originally was released and knew I wanted to see it. And mainly because of James McAvoy. James McAvoy, to me, is either not talked about enough or incredibly underrated as an actor. He blows my mind. The movie Split, he absolutely crushed it. He knows how to play Psycho so well that, I mean, I would put him toe-to-toe with Anthony Perkins from the original film Psycho. And to me, that's one of the hardest things to nail as an actor. McAvoy does it. He doesn't just do it. You want to know how to portray psychotic? Watch this movie. This movie is not ultimately some over-the-top scary film. It's more of a thriller. It's more suspense, to me, at least. And chilling. Chilling would be the word. There are instances with McAvoy where just the look that he gives, you know something's broken. Something has snapped. And it's incredible. It's incredible to watch. This is absolutely 1,000% a movie I'm going to watch all the time. All the time. I think it is so incredibly well done. And in fact, to be honest with you, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think down the line it could even move up to 9 out of 10 territory. We need to be talking about James McAvoy. Because he's that good. And he needs to be in more things that will get him the attention he deserves. And I'm sure he's happy with his roles and what he's gotten to be in. But, frankly, this performance here needs to be studied because it's on another level. A fun fact about this movie, though, it is actually a remake of the original Danish film by Christian Toftrup. And he got the idea for this story based on an experience that he had meeting/befriending a Dutch couple while on holiday with his wife. When they returned home, they actually received an invitation from that Dutch couple to come and visit them. They didn't ultimately end up accepting that invitation because they actually felt odd about the whole situation. To them, there was something off about that couple. Originally, Tafdrup, I believe, wanted to make a comedy out of the experience, but then he really got going down a darker path and thought, well, what if they were nuts? What if they were psychotic? So, it essentially it spawned from Christian's darkest thoughts of how the trip could have gone if they had accepted the invite. So, if you have not seen Speak No Evil and you're at all a horror buff, suspense for sure, thriller, if you like the creepy, kind of cringy style of horror, you have to see this. There is no you should. You have to see this film because I think it is that well done. Every piece of it. Now, it's an 8 out of 10 for me. Like I said, it could end up in the 9 out of 10 category. Looking ahead, I can absolutely see where that might be the case. But outside of maybe McAvoy's performance, I don't know that there's anything really potentially award-winning. Cinematography, maybe. Directing, maybe. But definitely McAvoy. McAvoy needs some awards for this. Just watch it. I promise you're going to understand it. You're going to understand why I'm saying this. At least I hope. To me, he deserves it. IMDb gave it a 6.8 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh with 83%. The audience score gives it 84%. Again, I give it an 8 out of 10. Right in line with Rotten Tomatoes and the audience. So, must see. An absolute must see. So, that is Speak No Evil. It came in 11th. We are into the top 10 finally. I really wanted this to be a little bit quicker, but I did want to at least dive in and give you a little more information about each of these films. Feel free, skip ahead. I know that these videos are long. Here's the deal. I don't make these videos for the algorithm. I'm not trying to become an influencer. I'm not trying to have this 1 million follower channel. I just want to talk about movies. And I want to talk about movies to other folks that love movies as well. And so always, always, always put your thoughts in the comments below and let me know what you think about these particular films and how they rank for you. But at the end of the day, I'm not worried about length. I don't care. I just want to talk about movies. So that's my statement on the length of these things. So be it. So, number 11 is Speak No Evil. We're into the top 10. Here we go.
I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions, and we are just super jazzed to be here. Where can I put my stuff?
What do you mean, we?
I wish I was as tall as all of you.
Who the heck are you?
I'm Envy. Look at your hair. Oh, yeah, not happening.
Okay, who's this guy?
What's your name, big fella? That's embarrassment. He's not really big on eye contact or, talking, but he's a really sweet guy.
Well, welcome to headquarters, embarrassment. Oh, we're doing a fit. No. Oh, nope, going high. Oh, you got a real sweaty palm there, buddy.
Number 10. Now, some of you may have been expecting this to be higher in my top 10. It would make complete sense based on how well it did at the box office. However, number 10 for me was Inside Out 2. It was directed by Kelsey Mann, written by Meg LaFave, Dave Holstein, and Kelsey Mann, starring Amy Poehler, Maya Hawke, Kensington Tallman, Liza Lapira, Tony Hale, Lewis Black, Phyllis Smith, Ayo Edebiri, and James Austin Johnson, among many others. I always try to give a shout out to James Austin Johnson. I personally, and this isn't to toot my own horn or try to become popular, but I completely grew up with him. I went to high school with James Austin Johnson, and I love seeing him do well. Truly, genuinely love seeing him do well. He was incredibly funny in our high school performances, the stand-up that he would do for us. He's an incredibly talented individual that is blessed in that regard. Unbelievable talent, and more than deserving of the roles in which he's gotten and the limelight that he's gotten in terms of Saturday Night Live. And I believe he's gone on a bunch of talk shows, including Seth Meyers a couple times. And as down to earth as he seems in those instances, he's even more so in real life. He's a genuine human and an incredibly thoughtful and amazing person. So I love seeing him do well. I will always love seeing him do well. So the budget for Inside Out 2 was $200 million. It was estimated at that. Domestic box office, it made $652.9 million as of January 11th. International box office was $1.04 billion. Worldwide, $1.69 billion as of January 11th. That's pretty incredible. Not a lot of films cross that $1 billion mark. So it actually, and I'll just use that to go straight into the fun fact about this movie, it became the highest grossing animated film of all time globally in just 19 days. And in case you're wondering, that's the fastest ever for an animated film. So, kudos for Inside Out 2. I thought it was a great movie. I definitely enjoyed it. It discusses something. It would have been very easy to just cookie cutter the original. If you're history buffs, you probably know what a Levittown is, but essentially it's a style that was of neighborhood that was created to where everything was just cookie cutter. Everything looked the same because it was very easy to build out a neighborhood that fast, efficiently, for lack of a better term. It's very easy to do that with art, especially film, that did very well with its first film. They didn't do that with this one. That's what I love about it. Yes, it takes pieces of the original, but it expands on it. Now we're dealing with Riley growing up and going through adolescence and dealing with these new emotions. And I don't know that I have ever seen anyone nail what anxiety feels like more than they did with this film. They crushed it. They crushed it. They stuck the landing on the movie. So I absolutely loved the film. It got a 10 out of 10 from me. So, I mean, now we're really getting into the part of the list where potentially things could move up or down within the top 10 for sure. All of these are, to me, masterpieces from last year. They deserve to be discussed. They deserve to be honored with that level of discussion. So, IMDb gives it a 7.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh with 91%. The audience, it's verified hot on the popcorn meter with 95%. Again, for me, I give it a 10 out of 10. They did for this what I was hoping they would do with Moana 2. It felt like its own thing. And honestly, it felt like they kind of did that without even needing a big bad. So kudos. Kudos to the team on this one. So, Inside Out, I give it a 10 out of 10, and it is number 10 in my top 10. That moves us on to number 9.
Look at her. Who? That woman, Marcia. She's walking alone. We should go talk to her.
We just met her.
Yeah, but she's got this, like, deep sadness behind her eyes, you know?
She does?
Yeah, you didn't notice that?
During the introductions? No.
I think we should check on her.
Benji, maybe she wants to be alone.
Sorry. No one wants to be alone, Dave. Okay, I'm gonna check it out.
At number 9, we have a true original. This is not a sequel. It was directed by Jesse Eisenberg, written by Jesse Eisenberg, starring Jesse Eisenberg, Kieran Culkin, Olha Bosova, Banner Eisenberg, Jacob Gosowski. And I am talking, of course, about A Real Pain. The budget for the film is estimated at $3 million. Domestically, it made $7.94 million as of January 11th. Internationally, it made $1.88 million. And overall, worldwide, it made $9.83 million. Fun fact about this movie, you heard me say Banner Eisenberg. Wonder who that could be. Turns out it marks the first instance of Banner Eisenberg, who is Jesse Eisenberg's son, in a film, and it happens to be a film written, directed, and acted in by his father. And that's incredibly touching. I think, especially a movie like this. This movie right here, moving, I don't even know is the right word. It just, it's touching. Watching Kieran Culkin and Eisenberg's relationship, I think there's definitely a chance with this that Kieran Culkin wins Best Supporting Actor. I think there's definitely a chance of it. He nails it. Now, I will say, Kieran kind of has a little bit of the Denzel Washington syndrome I talked about earlier, where I feel like I'm kind of watching Kieran Culkin from Succession in this movie. I feel like I'm watching Roman. But it works. And if it works, it works. There's a lot more, well, I wouldn't say that. It taps into emotion very well for his character. And his character is very well thought out. And I think that this film also offers, as well, another important discussion about trauma, about what a real pain is. So, I thought it was a great movie. Absolutely deserving of the Oscar conversation that is around it. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I will definitely be rewatching it. I will definitely own a physical copy, probably a digital copy. I don't know, but I'm definitely going to own a physical copy. IMDb gave it a 7.2 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh by the critics at 96%. Audience score, Popcorn Meter, it is verified hot with 81%. And I give it a 10 out of 10. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great film. And kudos to Jesse Eisenberg. Very well done. Very, very well done. So, that is A Real Pain coming in at number 9. And now we're on to number 8. At number 8, we have A Quiet Place, Day One. Directed by Michael Sarnowski, written by Michael Sarnowski, John Krasinski, Brian Woods, Scott Beck, starring Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, Alex Wolff, Diamond Hounsou, I believe I'm saying that right, maybe, and Eliane Umuri, which I'm quite certain I'm not saying that one right. Told you John Krasinski would be back. So, the budget for this movie was $67 million estimated. At the domestic box office, it made $138.9 million. Internationally, $122 million. Worldwide, $260.9 million. Another film that crushed it. And for me, yet again, another property I'm a fan of, and yet again, speaks to sequels in that top 10 at the box office from last year. I absolutely empathize with the audience that wants to see more of the things that they've enjoyed. Tell me more. Give me more. I get it. I get it. A Quiet Place Day One kind of feels like a film on its own within the franchise. It's a completely new story with new people. And Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, two people I couldn't be cheering harder for. They crush it. They crushed it in their roles. It's very, very, very well done. And a very interesting dynamic to have A Quiet Place, which if you've seen any of them or you know anything about them, these are monsters that cannot see, but they are hyper aware with their ears or the equivalent thereof. So any movement, any sound is going to alert them to your presence, and they will kill you, and they will eat you. To sound like Liam Neeson from Taken. I think that Joseph Quinn, probably at this point in time most well known for Stranger Things and his role in that as Eddie, and he was incredible there. Also known for Gladiator, which was a part of my list, Gladiator 2. The scenes with him and the way in which he can show emotion. Joseph Quinn is very good with emotions and being able to tap into sadness and fear and being able to show that. He does a very good job at it. So, I absolutely, from the beginning of this movie, bought into the characters, bought into the story, and I stayed there the entire movie. I don't think I was ever jolted from the experience. I also loved the cat that was in it, which, interestingly enough, Lupita Nyong'o stated that she was scared of cats prior to this movie. Like, very scared of cats. So, that's an interesting story. If you haven't heard about that, my review of A Quiet Place Day One is on this channel as well, where I discuss that a little bit, but also look it up. It's a fun story. Anyway, ultimately, IMDb gives this a 6.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh, with critics giving it an 86%. Audience score, Popcorn Meter, gets a 72%, and for me, it gets a 10 out of 10. Yet again, another movie, another franchise I will absolutely repeat watch over and over and over again. So, this movie was a great addition to that. Quick fun fact, Michael Sarnowski, who directed and wrote or co-wrote this particular installment, stated that John Krasinski actually chose him to direct this prequel due to his film Pig, which starred Nicolas Cage. So I thought that was a cool fact. You know, Krasinski had seen some previous work that blew him away and knew this person is who I want at the helm of the Quiet Place franchise. So, great movie. Great movie. Highly recommend. You like horror, especially if you like the Quiet Place franchise, give it a watch. That is A Quiet Place Day 1, and it comes in 8th. And now we move on to number 7.
It's been a program that was established to help the population with management skills, and it's turned into something a bit more, wonderful, because it helps people get more in touch with their feelings and able to process and actually move through and truly get some rehabilitation.
So are you acting at all during this interview?
At number 7, we have Sing Sing. It was directed by Greg Quaidar, written by John H. Richardson, Brent Buell, Clint Bentley, Greg Quaidar, Clarence Macklin, John Devine G. Whitfield. Starring Coleman Domingo, Clarence Macklin, Sean San Jose, and Paul Raci, among many others. The budget for this movie was around $2 million. That's the estimate, at least. It made $3 million at the domestic box office, so making its budget back, and then some, as of February 8th. Internationally, it made $887,494. Worldwide, that brings its total to $3.9 million, almost doubling as of February 8th what its budget was, its estimated budget. This film has been talked about extensively in Oscar conversations, especially Coleman Domingo's performance. When this trailer came out, it was yet another instance where I said, watch out, that could be an Oscar contender. And here we are discussing that. Coleman Domingo in this movie, his portrayal of his character, I felt like I was watching his character and not him playing his character. We'll put it that way. And that's exactly what you need to do as an actor. Now, this movie, if you don't know what it's about, is about incarcerated individuals that find a common love of theater while in prison. I believe it's the Sing Sing prison. While in prison, that also helps them talk about more openly their emotions, what they're going through, and helps change them for the better. And as a former theater nerd, this film meant a lot to me. And to have the story within a prison and among incarcerated individuals, it only enhances it that much more and makes it that much more touching. On top of it being a true story. So, fun fact about this movie is that most of the cast is actually made up of real-life, formerly incarcerated individuals that were actually a part of the theater troupe that is mentioned in this film. Additionally, at the beginning of the film, it shows characters that are auditioning for a part in the play that's in the movie, and those were actually real audition tapes used to cast the film. So, this one here is very special. Very, very special. My only qualm with it, if I'm being honest, would be that the pace, it was slow. It was slower. It felt like the pace never really went like this and then back down. I didn't feel like I was watching a bell curve of a movie. I felt like I was just watching a steady-paced movie, which is fine. You know, I don't think that destroys it, but I think there could have been some decisions made that would have enhanced it that much more, I guess. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, though, this movie gets a 10 out of 10 from me. IMDb gives it a 7.7 out of 10. It's certified fresh from critics on Rotten Tomatoes with 97%. And the audience also gives it a 97%. It is absolutely well deserving of its Oscar conversation and discussion and nominations. So, if you have not seen this movie, I don't know what platform right now you can watch it streaming on. They did release it again briefly in theaters not too long ago, and maybe they'll do that again. I don't know. But find a way to see this movie because it's very good. It's very touching, and it is absolutely worth a watch and a rewatch, and it will live on my shelf. So, that is Sing Sing at number 7. And now we move on to number 6, closing in on the top 5.
Something bad is happening in Oz.
The best way to bring folks together is to give them a real good enemy.
You have no real power.
That's why I need you.
Don't let her get away! This wicked witch.
Don't be afraid.
I'm not afraid. It's the wizard who should be afraid of me.
Number 6, just outside the top 5, was Wicked, a film a lot of us have been talking about ever since it dropped. In fact, ever since the trailer dropped. This film was directed by John M. Chu, written by Winnie Holzman, Dana Fox, Gregory Maguire, and L. Frank Baum, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jeff Goldblum, Michelle Yeoh, and Jonathan Bailey, among many others. Budget for the film was estimated at about $150 million. The domestic box office, it made $455 million as of January 11th. Internationally, it made $228.1 million. And overall, worldwide, that came to $683.2 million. That leads to a fun fact about this movie. So, Wicked, Part 1, which I'll talk about in a second, became the highest grossing film based on a Broadway musical ever. It beat out Mamma Mia, which held that title for more than a decade. It only took Wicked a little over a month to accomplish that feat. That's pretty impressive. No, that's not pretty. That's very impressive. And it's well-deserved. It is absolutely well-deserved. I do not have a review of this on my channel. It's been a minute since I've been on here, to be honest, and it's great to be back. And I'm looking to make some shifts and have some fun this year, including, you're used to seeing me in a backwards hat and a t-shirt. I feel like this looks more like the word gaffer. So I'll probably keep this kind of attire going forward. But anyway, at least the hat. So this movie is part 1 of the actual Broadway musical, Wicked. The way in which it was marketed, I feel like a lot of people didn't know that. And that led to some criticisms. And if you didn't know, then rightfully so. If this had been the case and it was not just a part 1, then your critique would be valid. But considering this is a part 1, it's not really valid. Additionally, people that love the movie Wizard of Oz, that have not seen the Broadway play, have criticisms about this show. And I mean, I've heard the gamut on it. I don't understand why it's so hard for people to believe that she's green when they're surrounded by talking animals. Here's the deal, guys. Those animals had been talking for years. It was the norm. You grew up knowing it was the norm. This is the first instance of someone being green. That's odd. And many times the things that are odd or different are chastised. They're cast out by society. They are the outcasts. This film is very much so about that very topic. So if anything, her being green and people having a problem with it is one of the main themes and main threads of the whole story. And you absolutely cannot base any form of judgment, any form of critique, in my opinion, of this movie off of Wizard of Oz. This is like a spin-off. The source material for this movie is the musical, not Wizard of Oz. And in my opinion, it nailed the source material. Cynthia Erivo did phenomenally well. To me, it was very colorful. I've also heard it wasn't that colorful. It was very colorful. If anything, though, if I could make the argument for the group that's saying it wasn't colorful enough, maybe they relied too heavily on one color in the scenes where they chose color. Well, I make it sound like there was black and white. Maybe there were scenes where they relied too heavily on one color. But it was very colorful. So I don't really get that critique either. I've heard Ariana Grande's character is too annoying. That's the point. Many of the townspeople characters, and this is probably why they latch on to Galinda or Glinda, are so self-consumed and self-obsessed that it's disgusting. It's annoying. That's truth. Think about the times that you've known someone so consumed in themselves, and think about what that looked like. It looked stupid, didn't it? They look stupid. They're annoying. This film, I'm not even going to say this, Ariana Grande, however you want to pronounce it, crushes this role, specifically because she comes off annoying. So I don't accept that criticism either. Bottom line, I think that this movie was spectacular. I think it was incredibly well done. There are notes that are hit in this thing that give me chills, particularly towards the end, and scenes with those notes. So I absolutely adore this film. It is one I will completely go back to on a regular basis. I cannot wait for part 2 to come out. If you're a Wicked fan, you know part 2 is just as good, if not better. And if you're not a Wicked fan, I don't know why you'd go see Wicked, first of all. But if you haven't seen Wicked and you don't know whether or not you are a fan, maybe go see maybe look up the Broadway musical first. Just see if it's for you. Even if it's not the full thing, look up some clips. Because the fact is, I've heard, and you are absolutely entitled to your opinion. In film, there is no definitive opinion. You've heard me say that over and over and over again. But the fact is, and I'm just going to tell you this, if you watched this movie and you didn't see the Broadway musical, and the only thing you have to go off of is the original Wizard of Oz, and you want to criticize this film, I got nothing for you. Frankly, I don't think that if your critique is solely based on that, to me, I don't think you can critique. You need to see the Broadway musical. Now, if it didn't meet the Broadway musical, if it took liberties with the story or anything like that and you didn't like that, that's one thing. But this is a whole different kind of telling of anything we've known about from the original Wizard of Oz. Yes, it pulls from Wizard of Oz, but this is a deeper dive and a different kind of story. So watch the Broadway and then watch the movie and then give me your critique. Anyway, that's me on my soapbox. I'm stepping off of it. Great film. Loved it. Adored it. Rooting for Cynthia Erivo 1000%. So, IMDb gives this a 7.8 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh with 88%. Audience, popcorn meter, it's verified hot with 95%. I give it a 10 out of 10. Like I said, I'm going to watch this, rewatch it again, and I cannot wait for that sequel. Generally, by the way, I'm going to step one more time back up into the soapbox just to say, if you haven't seen the Broadway play and you do have questions that may impact your take of this movie, likely those questions would be answered if you watch the full musical. You need to see the second half. So, anyway, that is Wicked. It is 6th in my top 25 list, and now we're moving into the top 5. So, this is where things get interesting. Here we go. Number 5.
You gotta learn to make stuff up. Come on, find that woo inside you.
Searching.
Woo, 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 woo.
Anything yet?
No.
Just have a little fun for once.
Gosling, 0186. There, you see what I did? His numbering is out of sequence.
At number 5, we have The Wild Robot. Directed by Chris Saunders, I believe. Written by Chris Saunders and Peter Brown. Starring Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Kit Connor, Bill Nighy, Mark Hamill, Catherine O'Hara, among many others. The budget was estimated at $78 million. Domestically, it made $143.2 million as of January 11th. Internationally, $181.4 million. Worldwide, $324.7 million. DreamWorks, home run. Absolute home run on this movie. I do have a review of this film on this channel to dive deep into it and discuss it. So I'm not going to do that here, but I will say that I adored it. It's based off of a book series, which actually leads into the fun fact. Chris Saunders has confirmed that a sequel is already in the works to this movie. The film has had 83 nominations for various awards, including the Golden Globes, and it has 41 wins out of those 83. So it's got a pretty good batting average. It's currently nominated for an Oscar. So, this film is touching in a lot of ways. And if you are an animal lover, you're going to really enjoy this. But it's very much so a film. It's a film about foster parenthood. It's discussing that. It's discussing becoming more than we were originally programmed to be, which they actually say, I think, in the trailer. There is so much to this movie. So if you love animated films like me, if your kids love animated films, which they probably do, this is something you can sit down together and watch and really enjoy and have a good time. And probably have a good discussion after it. So IMDb gives us an 8.2 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh with 97% from critics. It's verified hot on the popcorn meter from the audience with 98%. And I give it a 10 out of 10. This movie's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal do incredible jobs, and so do the other voice actors. You're never going to go wrong with Mark Hamill as a voice actor. So, really good film. I would highly encourage you to check it out. I believe right now it is streaming on Peacock, so it's available to watch right now. So, if you are at all interested in this, and I would definitely encourage you, even if you're remotely interested in this, I would encourage you to see it. I'd encourage you to watch it because I think you're really going to like it. It's a film that I will definitely be coming back to over and over again. So I could say that, though. I'm telling you right now, that's going to be the case from here on out. The rest of the list, these are films. They will be on my shelf, and I will continue to come back to them. So that is The Wild Robot at number 5. And we now move on to number 4.
Life is a mystery. Everyone must stand alone. I hear you call my name, and it feels like home.
Number 4, Deadpool and Wolverine. It's directed by Sean Levy, written by Ryan Reynolds, Rhett Reese, Paul Wernick. It starred Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Emma Corrin, and Matthew McFadden, among plenty of others, and some very special cameos. I will tell you that. And if you know Ryan Reynolds, if you know Deadpool, you know there are going to be cameos. So I'm not going to tell you what they are if you haven't seen the movie, but they're special. So the budget for this movie was $200 million estimated. At the domestic box office, it made $636.7 million. Internationally, it made $701.3 million, and worldwide, $1.33 billion. Right up there with Inside Out 2. It was fun to watch for a while, the race between them. This movie's special. It's so funny, as all of the Deadpool films are, but the inclusion of Hugh Jackman, I didn't think that there was an ingredient that you could add to a Deadpool film. I mean, I assumed if you did add Hugh Jackman, it probably would take off, but not to this level. The way the two interact together is stunning, to say the least. And you can tell they had so much fun making this movie. And Hugh Jackman's been very open about that he really enjoyed making this film. So, a lot of fun to watch. I'm just going to keep saying that. I was laughing I was on the edge of my seat. There were plenty of thrills, plenty of suspense. The opening credit sequence may be the greatest opening credits I've ever witnessed. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it, I envy you, because you're in for something special, because it'll be your first time seeing it. So if you're a Marvel fan, if you're a Deadpool fan, chances are if you're a Marvel fan, you are a Deadpool fan. Give this a watch, because it is easily up there with the likes of Endgame and some of the best that Marvel has produced, for sure. So, fun fact about this movie, it actually became the highest grossing rated R film of all time, beating out 2019's Joker. It only took Deadpool and Wolverine 23 days to accomplish that. Less than 2 weeks. Or sorry, not 2 weeks. Math. My math, it's not mathing. Only over just 3 weeks to accomplish that. Highest grossing R-rated film of all time. So, IMDb gives this a 7.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh at 78%. The audience score, the popcorn meter, it's verified hot with 94%. For me, it's a 10 out of 10. It's perfection. So, if you haven't seen it, give it a watch. That is Deadpool and Wolverine at number 4, and that brings us to the top 3. Number 3.
Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. Even Christ was not certain at the end. Dio mio, perché mi hai abbandonato? He cried out in his agony at the 9th hour on the cross. Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith.
At number 3, it is Conclave. This is currently streaming on Peacock, and I'm going to just go ahead and start off with this. Most of the time I've been diving directly into the directed by, but I'm going to go ahead and start off with this. It's on Peacock. It's a thriller. It's suspenseful. If you haven't seen this, even if you're not interested in it, stop this video right now. Go to Peacock and put it on. Seriously. It's that good. It's directed by Edward Berger, written by Peter Strawn and Robert Harris. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Lucian Samadi, among many others. The budget for the film was $20 million. The domestic box office was $31.4 million, so it made it back domestically, but then internationally took in $17.4 million. Total worldwide came to $48.8 million, more than doubling what the budget was for the film. That's pretty good. So, the fun fact about this movie, Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow have all been nominated for an Academy Award for past films. None of them have ever won one. So, I will be closely watching the Academy Awards related to this movie. I believe it's Ralph Fiennes who is nominated for one, and maybe Lithgow or Tucci for supporting. I'll have to go back and check that, though. I don't want to say that for certain. Anyway, and I'll be doing my Oscars picks prior. So, where we'll dive into that more. Anyway, this movie, I can't say enough about this movie, because to be honest with you, at this point in this list, we are at the level that any of these top 3 could be interchangeable. Actually, I take that back. Number 2 and number 3 could swap back and forth, but when I get to number 1, nothing's going to take that over. Anyway, number 3, Conclave, stunning. Absolutely stunning. The shots in it are masterfully done. I mean, they could just be pictures, and I would love just staring at them, which is what a movie is. It's moving pictures. The acting, I'm convinced you could put Ralph Fiennes in front of a camera and have him do a reading of the Hokey Pokey, and it would be on another level. He's just good. He knows what he's doing. And this role is absolutely no different. There are a lot of important themes, a lot of things to discuss from it, about having a crisis of faith, doubt, the role that doubt plays in our faith. It's good. It's perfection. There's nothing else I can say about it. It is a masterpiece. So, as I said before, anything above that 5 level is going to be on my shelf, which is over here, actually. It's going to be on my shelf. It's probably, I might have a digital copy of it. I will have a physical copy of it, though, 1,000%, as long as it's released physically. So, which I hope they continue to do. That being said, IMDb gives this a 7.4 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh at 93%. The audience score for this movie is 86%. And for me, it is a 10 out of 10. So, that is number 3, Conclave. And now we're on to number 2. At number 2, probably no surprise, or maybe it is a surprise, I don't know, but number 2 is Dune Part 2. The director was Denis Villeneuve. It was written by Denis Villeneuve, John Spates, and of course based on the book by Frank Herbert. It starred Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken. The list goes on in this movie. Stunning cast. The budget was estimated to be $190 million. Domestically, it took in $282.1 million. Internationally, $425 million, for a total worldwide of $707.1 million, destroying the budget, what they needed to make back. This movie right here, Steven Spielberg, and he's also a part of the fun fact, but this is something different. If you've watched the Spielberg documentary on Max, which, by the way, if you haven't, give it a watch if you even remotely like film or Steven Spielberg, because it's really, really good. But Spielberg says in that documentary that his penultimate, or one of his penultimate films, was Lawrence of Arabia. And he says that when he saw that, he thought to himself, I don't want to be a director anymore, because I could never top that. Ever since I heard him say that, I've been asking myself, what is my Lawrence of Arabia? And I can't, or what films would be like my Lawrence of Arabia? Because I'm certain there's a couple. I'm sure there's a couple for Steven Spielberg. One would probably be Godzilla -1. But this movie is right up there with it. I was on the edge of my seat. There is a scene, and if you're even remotely on social media, I'm sure you've seen people post about it, but there is a scene with people walking that is stunning. There's multiple scenes that are stunning, but that, it happens so early in the movie that was the point I set up in my seat, and I don't know that I ever sat back. This film right here is The Empire Strikes Back for Dune. It's on another level. It makes one look just good. And that's saying something, because one was very, very good. So this film, as some would say, is, to me, pure cinema. It's fantastic. Denis Villeneuve has a high bar after this one, and he already had one before it. I mean, we're talking about movies like Arrival, Prisoners. He just doesn't miss. He's that good. So, fun fact about this movie, Steven Spielberg, told you he'd come back up, was actually quoted as saying that this was, quote, one of the most brilliant science fiction films I've ever seen. It also received additional praise from Christopher Nolan. So, I feel like some people may write Dune off, and this is my fear, like they've written off superhero movies, that it's just a popcorn movie. It's just a theme park, as Scorsese would say, which gets on my nerves to no end. It's not. It's not. This film has so many things to it. The cinematography, the acting, the writing, the directing, and the themes. And I think it's a very important theme about the dangers of assigning a messianic or messiah complex to a person and what that can do, among other discussions. So, anyway, great movie. It's number 2. It's number 2 of my top 25 from last year. So, it's stunning. So, IMDb 8.5 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh at 92% by the critics. It is verified hot on the popcorn meter by the audience at 95%. And it gets a 10 out of 10 from me, because it is perfection. Absolutely 1,000% perfection. So, that is Dune Part 2 coming in at number 2. And now, We finally made it. The number one film of 2024. Here it is. The number one film of 2024 for me was Flow, a film that is directed by Gens Zilbalotis from Latvia, written by Gens Zilbalotis and Matisse Kaza. The budget was $3.5 million. It made $2.7 million at the domestic box office. Internationally, $1.8 million, for a total of $4.5 million worldwide. So it made its budget back, and then some. So the whole film, and this is my fun fact, but also I'm going to talk about this for a little bit. So just prepare. The whole film was made with a free open source software known as Blender. It was also made utilizing a software known as Eevee. At least that's my understanding. E-E-V-E-E. Gens Zilbalotis, I have been obsessed with this movie from the moment I saw it, and it was at the very end of last year. In fact, it was probably the last film I saw. And I was not expecting it. I expected it to be good. I didn't expect it to be what it is, and that is beyond perfection. If something can be beyond perfection, here's your example. This film right here battles, for me personally, with Godzilla Minus One as my all-time, spoiler, but my all-time favorite film ever made. It's brilliance. Now, some people watch this movie and their takeaway from it is that there's some kind of a religious or an environmental or a political statement, or all three, or two of the three. Gens Zilbalotis has not shared his personal feelings about what this movie is about completely, but he has said some things. First of all, that he does appreciate that people take their own thing from this movie. He likes that. That's why he doesn't offer up his opinion. He has also stated that in a lot of ways, the movie that he made prior to this, he made completely by himself. It was called Away. And I think that was his first feature film. He had other shorts, but I think his first feature film was Away, which you can see on Amazon Prime, by the way. So if you enjoy this movie as much as I did, you're probably going to want to see his prior stuff, right? He said very much that this film, the cat, is kind of like him during the making of this film, learning how to not be solely independent, learning how to trust others, how to delegate and work with others. This film has a lot of meanings. A lot. Each character, in fact, is a discussion of a whole other theme, a whole other message. Except for the capybara. I think that one's pretty straightforward. But other than that, there are quite a few messages in it, which is crazy because there's not one line of dialogue in this movie. It's not a silent movie. It's just dialogue free. All of the sounds, in terms of the sounds animals make in this movie, were actually recorded from the animals themselves, with the exception of the capybara, that they couldn't quite get the sound that they wanted for, and I believe they used a camel sound for that character. But everything else is the actual animal sound. So, pretty amazing. I mean, I could list off so many amazing things about this movie. So many amazing takeaways. Fascinating facts. When I tell you I have watched as many interviews as I could find of Gent Zilbalotis, I have watched that many interviews. I'm fascinated. I'm in. Give me as much as you can of his material at this point. I'm sold. He stated that his inspiration comes from the likes of, Studio Ghibli films. I don't know why I'm blanking on the head of Studio Ghibli, but forgive me for that. Anyway, Studio Ghibli films, in terms of animation, likes or is inspired by, in terms of real life films, Akira Kurosawa, which is one of my all-time, if not my all-time favorite director. And you can see it. There's nothing I can say against this movie. Nothing. I'm in awe. And you think for a second that you're not going to be able to follow along since there's no dialogue. That is not the case. You find yourself when these animals, like when the cat meows or the dog barks, you're also paying attention to their movements, their gestures, and essentially inserting the dialogue yourself. And that's just stunning. So, if you haven't seen this, you have to see it. You have to see it. And I got to be honest with you. This is up against the likes of Inside Out 2 and Wild Robot at the Oscars. And this film, remember I said both Wild Robot and Inside Out 2 were phenomenal films. In fact, they're in my top 10. But this film right here blows them out of the water. This is an Academy Award winner if I've ever seen one. So, if you haven't seen this movie, good news to you. It's coming to HBO Max on the 14th. So, you'll get to see it. You can stream it before you buy it. That update came from Gent Silbalotis himself. I've already got a digital copy of this movie. Already bought one. I could see myself owning multiple physical copies, to be honest. Like it's that good. I want to do everything possible to celebrate this film. It's that good, I promise. So, IMDb, it gets a 7.9 out of 10. It is certified fresh by critics with 97%. It's also verified hot from audience with 99%. I give it a 10 out of 10. I'm telling you right now, watch this movie. And then watch it again. Because I promise you'll get something else the second time. So, it's a masterpiece. An absolute masterpiece. So, that is my number one pick for my top 25 of 2024. Flow. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope I haven't bored you to death. Again, I do this as much for me as I do for you. I find that the more that I talk about these movies, the more that I get dialogue out, the more that I self-discover things because I'm outwardly thinking and talking through them. But I also want this to be fun for you because I know I love channels that actively go through their top 10s, their top 15s, their top 20s, their top 25s. I love it. I can't get enough of that as a film lover. The Watch Mojos, All the Right Movies. I don't know that All the Right Movies, I'm sure they do a ranked list. I don't know that I've seen it though. But if you don't follow them too on YouTube. They're incredible. And that's a team. A few guys talking about great films. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope if you've stumbled across this it's not a podcast, this YouTube channel, that you'll follow, that you'll like it, subscribe, that you'll comment. Tell me what your top films were and the ranking for 2024. Give me your opinion on some of my rankings. That's what's fun. That's the fun part, is actively having a dialogue with other film lovers and being not judgmental about it, being supportive. Because to be honest, everything I just listed off, that's not definitive. There is no I don't care if it comes from Scorsese. There is no definitive list. There never will be. That does not exist in art. Always remember that. Your opinion is as valid as anybody else's. I don't care if your number one film of all time is Dumb and Dumber 2. There are no definitive opinions. So, again, hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe to the channel. I'll continue putting out content. I'm planning to do an Oscars, my pick for the Oscars video before the Oscars, which is on March 2nd. So I'm going to have to get that turned around quick. And also, you can find me on Facebook. There's a Facebook page for The Gaffer. Instagram, Threads. I don't do Twitter. So don't even look there. Threads, Facebook, Instagram. Pretty soon, I'm hoping to have a Spotify set up so you can listen to these on your drives. I think that would be nice as well. And I'm going to continue growing. You know, offer me suggestions of things you would like to see me do. You know, and be constructive about it. Don't obviously come in here and go, your videos are too long and I don't want to watch it that long. Then maybe the channel's not for you. And that's okay. Perfectly fine. But I really enjoy just being able to discuss this, and I'm not putting a time limit on it. Sorry. So, offer up your ideas. I'm also going to be, hopefully before too long, adding a new camera instead of having to use just my computer screen's camera to make things a little more crisp. So, stay tuned. Gaffer is continuing to grow. Looking forward to 2025 and what it brings to the channel. But until next time, get out there, support your theaters, support your local theaters, support physical media, and in doing that, you will support your favorite artists, directors, movies. Trust me. So, until next time, this has been The Gaffer, and in particularly, Outranked.